about your love, something about your love changes everything, changes everything. Something about your love, something about your love changes everything, changes everything. Something about your love, something about your love changes everything, changes everything. Something about your love, something about your love changes everything. You turn my morning into dancing, you turn my morning into dancing. You turn my morning into dancing. You turn my morning into dancing. 'Cause your love changes everything. Your love changes everything. You turn my morning into dancing. You turn my morning into dancing. You turn my morning into dancing. 'Cause your love changes everything. Your love changes everything. Oh, there's something about your love, something about your love changes everything in my body. Oh, something about your love, something about your love changes everything. It changes everything. Something about your love, something about your love changes everything. It changes everything. Something about your love, something about your love changes everything, changes everything. Something about your love, something about your love changes everything. Something about your love, something about your love changes everything, changes everything. Something about your love, something about your love changes everything, changes everything. Something about your love, something about your love changes everything. You turn my morning into dancing. 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 Something about your love, something about your love changes everything.
Good morning, rooted men. It's so good to be with you this morning. I got up early this morning and I was doing some studying. And you ever watch YouTube videos and sometimes I watch them, because there's a lot of preachers on there that will give you their version of what they read in the scriptures. And I just happened to be flipping through there, and there's this picture of it was a cartoon of a band playing, and it said, "This is not worship." And I thought to myself, oh, I got to watch this one. And I'm thinking, wow, what, here we've been doing it wrong the whole time. it may have not been 100% what was video was about, which was, thank God, because I thought we were doing a good job. You come in since the beginning. I shouldn't say beginning of time because I don't know the beginning of time, but since as long as I've been in church, there's always been choirs or hymns that were sang in church, or bands that played, praise music. So now to have somebody say that's not worship, I was a little taken aback. But then sometimes I think the videos, they use a title that's gets you to click it. It's a clickbait, they call it, right? And what you get is a very remedial thing, that the music isn't the worship. And I think we all know that it's just a part of the worship service. We worship through music, but we also worship through our life and our actions. and to say one thing isn't worship, I don't know. I guess I was frustrated by the end of the video. I was like, oh, I wasted all this time on this. I should have known better. It's pretty common in YouTube land, I'm afraid. Anyway, I'm with you. I've been practicing. I studied and everything just to see who. Okay, so Sue's here this morning. How about that? Chuck B's here. Good morning, Chuck. And Pastor Tom's here. And Pastor Tom's here again. And Chris Connolly's here. Good morning, Chris. Bert Reggiani's here. Brian Vlaming's here. And Ken Gooch is here. Who's missing? Is there somebody missing? It says 15. It says 15 people. That's crazy. Anyway. See, somebody missing. Chris, Bert, Ken. Who knows? I'll think of it later after we click offline. Today we're going to be in Judges 7 again, and we're talking, and Gideon is going to attack. All the stuff going up to this has all been preparation. It's all the back and forth with God, and the testing of God, and the recruiting of troops. And he starts with 32,000, and he goes to 22,000, and then God says, no, that's still too many. And I can imagine Gideon going, what? Yeah. And then he's got 300, right? He's got 300 men. And nobody in their right mind. I mean, I've read anywhere, they could have had anywhere from 100 up to 135,000 Midianites. They said they were like locusts, or what is the term they used? Sands, like the sand on the ocean, the shoreline. It was, the odds were daunting. I mean, I can't imagine any right-minded person would look at those and say, oh yeah, this is a lock. We'll win this for sure. Gideon had to have a lot of faith in God. Gideon really had to have a lot of faith in God, because 300 men, it wasn't going to be 300 men defeating the Midianites. So it had to be God. And that was God's plan in the beginning, to make this so big and so obvious, to remind these people why they are where they're at, and also to remind them who is really God, not this Baal guy who's an old Phoenician. I guess the Canaanites started it, but we sometimes need a kick in the pants. Sometimes we need a wake-up call. I think it's the words we'll use in today's language, where we have to understand why things are the way they are. And this is like the first 3 judges. He just appointed a judge and they went and fixed it. This time, there's a lot going on, and he's going to make it big. And he sent an angel to testify, and then he creates this unwinnable scenario that no one in their right mind would go into. And then this is what happens. All right, let me see if I can pull it up. Ooh, that's not right. We're getting there, I promise. Okay, I hope you can read that. So Gideon and the 100 men who were with him came to the outskirts of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch. And when they had just set the watch, so the watches had switched. They always put like 4 or 5 hours. They would stay and watch, and then the next guy would come and they'd switch. So they had just changed. And they blew the trumpets and smashed the jars that were in their hands. And then 3 companies blew the trumpets and broke the jars. They held in their left hands the torches and their right hands the trumpets to blow. And they cried out, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon." Every man stood in his place around the camp, and all the army ran, and they cried out and fled. When they blew the 300 trumpets, the Lord set every man's sword against his comrade and against all the army. So you figure there's 135,000 guys there, Midianites. Everywhere you look, there's probably Midianites. All of a sudden, you get this crazy noise and lights and trumpets and torches surrounding your camp, and panic sets in. I think it's a little better word. The panic, and it says right here, the Lord set every man's sword against his comrade and against the army. So they came out of their tents in a panic state, and they started attacking each other. They started killing one another. And then the army fled as far as Beth Shittah towards Zerah, and as far as the border to Abel Meholah by Tabbath. And all the men of Israel called out from Naphtali and from Asher and from all Manasseh, and they pursued after Midian. I read one spot where they felt that once the attack was done, when they fled, Gideon knew that there was no way they could keep them all from getting back across the Jordan unless the men from Asher and the other tribes cut them off before they could get back to the Jordan. All the men from Asher and Manasseh pursued after Midian. Gideon sent messengers throughout all the hill country Ephraim, saying, "Come down against the Midianites and capture the waters against them as far as Beth Hara and also the Jordan." So all the men of Ephraim were called out, and they captured the waters as far as Beth Barah and also the Jordan. And then in verse 25, it says, they captured 2 princes of Midian, Oreb and Zeb, and they killed Oreb at the rock of Oreb. And Zeb they killed at the winepress of Zeb. And they pursued Midian, and they brought the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon across the Jordan. Right. We can, that's it for today as far as the reading. The rock of Zeb and the winepress of, no, it's the winepress of Zeb and the rock of Oreb. Anyway, they named these places after these 2 guys, and I thought that was classic. You know how they did in the early king books too. You'll see, and this place is known as such and such today. Anyway, I noticed something in there, and I thought it was kind of cool. So today we learned that 2 princes, Oreb and Zeb, were killed, and they were executed. Next time, let's say you're going through Psalm 85, right? Psalm 83, I'm sorry. And you get around verses 11 to 12, and you read, like the nobles, make their nobles like Oreb and Zeb, all their princes like Zebah and Zalmunna, who say, let us take possession for ourselves the pastures of God. Well, today, now, you know who Oreb and Zeb are. Well, forever in your memory, right? You'll never forget it. But how about maybe if you're happen to be scrolling through the book of Isaiah 10, and you come across verse 26, and it'll say, and the Lord of hosts will wield against them a whip, as when he struck Midian at the rock of Oreb. And his staff will be over the sea, and he will lift it as he did in Egypt. I love how Scripture cross-references itself. We look at Scripture and it looks like a story, but then here you'll have 1-2 stories and they intersect. And some people say that evidence that is true. Others say that it doesn't make sense. But for us, we know that there's always more to the story, right? So what is the message of Gideon? What do you think the message from the passage of Gideon is about? Is it about a battle? Is it about Gideon winning a war? I think the overarching message through this entire book is when God calls people, they need to trust that he's right. Nobody would go into battle with 300 men. Nobody would even go to battle with 1,000 men compared to the fight they were fighting. It had to be God, because the numbers were too overwhelming. It defies logic, I guess would be the thing. Any good soldier or ruler would have said, no, we can't have this happening. So in this message, God is telling us to trust him, no matter how afraid you are. And we know Gideon was afraid. He wanted a lot of proof. No matter what kind of doubts you have, when he was told 300 men were enough, he can't tell me there was no doubt. You can't tell me he thought to himself, oh boy, this is going to be something. He did it. He trusted in God. He's not perfect. In fact, we'll read in the later chapters, he's far from perfect. He's flawed just like the rest of us. But when God calls you and asks you to do something, you trust him. That's what I have for you today, guys. I hope it was good. This has really been a fun story. This is, I don't think we've ever dug this deep into Judges, and it's been quite an adventure. Wait a minute. Ken came on. He says, God's ways are different than ours, and we should trust him. Yes, that's the point. I think that's the point of this whole thing is he's going to ask us maybe to do some things that don't make sense. And that's when we need to look to him. That's what I have for you today, boys. And I'm glad you came along with me, and thank you. But more than that, you need to have a firmly rooted day, and may someone see Jesus in you today. Peace.